Welcome to the Crosstalk Cafe right here in South Park. Pull up a chair and, just grab a seat at the table with us.
Yeah, we are so glad you're here today.
You really are. And whenever we sit down together like this, just friends walking the road of recovery together, we have to keep coming back to a foundational reality.
Right.
It's a truth that fundamentally changes how we view ourselves and, the people around us. And that truth is, we were not born with our hurts, hang-ups, and habits.
No, absolutely not.
We weren't born with these things hardwired into our DNA. We learned them. I was thinking about how a child tries to make sense of a world that feels unsafe. We pick up these tools to protect ourselves, and we keep using them long after the danger is gone.
It is the vital starting point for literally everything we do here. I mean, when you sit with us at this table, you are sitting with people who get it. We are peers in this journey.
Yeah, we're all in it.
Exactly. And a massive part of that journey is looking back with total unflinching honesty. A child enters this world completely vulnerable. They possess an absolute biological requirement for safety and connection.
Right, they have to have it.
They do. And when that environment feels unpredictable or chaotic or frankly just unsafe, that child is forced to figure out how to navigate it. They have to develop tools.
Survival tools.
Right. But the devastating reality is that the tools we forge in the fires of a difficult childhood, well, they often become the very chains that bind us as adults.
I heard someone once say that our adult hang-ups are often just childhood survival skills that stayed past their welcome. Like a kid wearing a suit of armor that was too big for them then, but now it's way too small. They're trapped inside it.
That's exactly it. Maybe you learned that if you were the perfect student, your parents wouldn't fight as much. Or maybe you learned that the only way to get any attention was to be the loudest person in the room. Those were your ways of staying safe. But now, in your marriage or your job, that same armor is actually keeping people at a distance. Recovery is about finally feeling safe enough in God's love to take that heavy metal off.
I want to look closely at what that armor actually is, mechanically speaking, because, we use words like armor or hang-ups, and it can sound a bit, abstract.
Like a personality quirk or something.
Exactly, like, that's just how I am. But we are talking about profound neurological adaptation here. This is a critical shift in our conversations here at the cafe.
It really is.
We are moving past just managing bad behavior. We are digging into the roots of our behaviors. In clinical terms, we are exploring attachment and developmental coping mechanisms.
Because we have to. We have to move past behavior management because, honestly, behavior management simply does not work long term.
It never does.
Right. If you just try to stop being angry or stop isolating or, stop people-pleasing through sheer willpower, you will inevitably fail.
Yeah, you just hit a wall.
You hit a wall because you are fighting against your own nervous system. When a child is placed in a threatening environment, their brain fundamentally wires itself for survival.
Yeah.
I mean, the brain's primary job is not to make you happy.
Right.
Its primary job is to keep you alive. During early childhood, the brain is incredibly plastic.
Meaning it's forming like millions of neural connections based on the environment.
It's
right?
like millions of them. If the environment is safe, the brain wires for connection, curiosity, emotional regulation. But, and this is the kicker, if the environment is dangerous, neglectful, or even just inconsistent, the brain wires for threat detection.
So let's break down the mechanics of that threat detection. How does a child's brain actually, lock that armor into place? What is happening physiologically when a 6-year-old realizes that their home is not a safe place to simply exist?
To understand that, we need to look at the relationship between two specific parts of the brain, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala.
Okay.
So the prefrontal cortex is the logical, rational, forward-thinking part of your brain. It handles emotional regulation, complex problem solving, social interaction.
It's the part that knows you're an adult.
Right. It knows what year it is. It understands nuance. But the amygdala, on the other hand, is the brain's primitive smoke detector. It is constantly scanning the environment for danger.
Constantly.
Yes. And when the amygdala detects a threat, like an angry tone of voice, a slamming door, or even just the cold silence of neglect, it bypasses the prefrontal cortex entirely.
It just totally overrides it.
Totally. It bypasses logic and triggers the body's survival mechanisms.
So the logical brain is essentially knocked offline. Like the child is sitting there making a rational, calculated decision about how to act.
No, not at all.
Their survival brain is just taking over to protect them.
Exactly. When a child is living in a state of chronic stress, their amygdala becomes hyperactive, and the connections to that prefrontal cortex become weakened.
Wow.
The brain literally decides that there is no time for logic.
Yeah.
There is only time for survival.
Right.
And this brings us to the core question that will guide our time together at the cafe today.
Yeah, I want everyone listening to really think about this.
Right. It is a question I want you, the person listening right now, sitting right here with us, to ask yourself with total honesty.
Mm.
As a child, what coping skills did you use to protect yourself or get attention?
Protection versus attention.
Yes.
When a child's environment feels emotionally or physically threatening or, even just deeply neglectful, they generally turn in one of those two directions. Let's start with protection.
Okay.
The child who learns to become invisible. I really want to know what is happening in the nervous system of the invisible child because society often completely misinterprets this response.
Well, we totally misinterpret it. We praise it.
Right. Oh, they're such an easy kid.
Exactly. We call them the easy child or the good child. But neurologically, the invisible child is living in a state of profound physiological freeze. We can understand this through something called polyvagal theory.
Okay, what is that?
It maps how our autonomic nervous system responds to stress. When we feel safe, we operate in our ventral vagal state. We are socially engaged, relaxed, connected.
Okay, so that's the healthy baseline.
Right. Now, when we face a threat we think we can fight or run away from, our sympathetic nervous system kicks in. That is the classic fight or flight.
Sure, we've all heard of that.
But what happens to a small child who cannot fight a terrifying adult and cannot run away because they literally rely on that adult for food and shelter?
I mean, they are trapped. There's no biological outlet for the fear.
Right. And when fight or flight are not viable options, the nervous system deploys its final, most extreme defense mechanism. Yes, the dorsal vagal response. It is a biological immobilization. The body literally shuts down to preserve life and minimize pain. Heart rate drops, breathing becomes shallow, and the child learns to disconnect from their own physical sensations.
Wow.
To become invisible in a volatile home, perhaps a home with active addiction, unpredictable rage, or suffocating tension, is a brilliant, necessary strategy.
Because standing out is dangerous.
Exactly. Having needs draws the eye of the storm right toward you. So you learn withdrawal, you learn total compliance, you become a ghost.
Let's ground that in the physical reality of a home, though, because becoming a ghost isn't just a metaphor. It is a learned physical discipline.
It really is.
I think about the sensory awareness required to pull that off. It is literally learning to hold your breath when you hear a specific sequence of footsteps on the stairs.
Yes.
It's knowing exactly which floorboards in the hallway creak and memorizing a path around them. It is sitting in a room for hours, moving as little as humanly possible so that you don't accidentally remind a volatile parent that you exist.
The sensory acuity of an invisible child is just staggering. Because their amygdala is running the show, they become absolute masters of reading microexpressions.
They have to be.
They do. They learn to read the emotional temperature of a room before they even step fully through the doorway. They can hear the specific, subtle way a key turns in the front door lock and know exactly what kind of evening is going to be.
Just from a key turning.
Yes. Did the key turn aggressively? Did the door shut harder than usual? The child's nervous system calculates the threat level in milliseconds. And the internal rule they lock into place is, if I am perfectly quiet, if I demand absolutely nothing, if I take up zero space, I will survive.
But wait, if they are shutting down their bodily responses, what happens to all the stress hormones? I mean, if they aren't fighting and they aren't fleeing, all that adrenaline and cortisol has to go somewhere, right?
That is the hidden tragedy of the invisible child. The stress hormones are still flooding their system, but the dorsal vagal freeze traps all that energy inside the body.
Oh.
Yeah. Over time, this chronic internal stress wreaks absolute havoc on the body's immune system, the digestive system, metabolic pathways. The child swallows their voice, their hunger, and their fear, but the body keeps the score.
That paints such a devastating, clear picture of the protection route. Now let's flip the coin.
Let's do it.
Let's look at the other reaction, attention. If the home isn't necessarily volatile, but is instead profoundly neglectful, emotionally absent, or just generally chaotic, a child might realize that being invisible is actually a death sentence.
Right.
If they are invisible, they will literally be forgotten, so they have to force the environment to acknowledge them.
Yes. If the dorsal vagal freeze is about disappearing, this response is about sympathetic nervous system hyperactivation. It is the drive to mobilize, to perform, or to rebel.
To make noise.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
A child fundamentally understands that they cannot survive without a caregiver's engagement. If you are starving for connection and the adults around you are entirely checked out, depressed, or distracted, you have to create a spectacle to get a crumb of engagement.
Let's break down the performer first. How does a child mechanize performance as a survival tool?
Well, the child realizes, my fundamental existence is not enough to warrant attention. I only get looked at when I achieve something extraordinary or when I am useful.
So they have to earn it.
Yes. So the sympathetic nervous system drives them into relentless action. They might become the family comedian, cracking
Yes.
jokes to break the unbearable, heavy tension in the house. Or they become the relentless overachiever, bringing home flawless report cards, not out of a love for learning, but because a perfect grade buys them a fleeting glance of parental approval.
It creates a completely transactional existence. They learn that their worth is entirely tied to utility. Like,
Yeah.
I am only as valuable as the trophies I bring home or the peace I keep.
Sadly, yes.
I've seen this manifest where an 8-year-old child essentially becomes the caregiver to their own
Oh,
parent.
absolutely.
They become the emotional anchor for a depressed mother or the peacekeeper for a chaotic father. They take on adult responsibilities because being indispensable is the only way they know how to secure their place in the family unit.
We call that parentification, and it is a profound form of trauma.
It really is.
The child sacrifices their own developmental needs to stabilize the adults, and neurologically, they become addicted to the dopamine hit of approval. But because the approval is based on their performance, not their innate worth, the dopamine fades quickly.
So they just have to keep doing it.
Over and over. They have to perform again and again and again. It is an exhausting treadmill.
And what if they can't perform? What if they aren't the straight-A student or they just don't have the capacity to be the family caregiver?
Yeah.
That is where the rebel emerges, right?
Yes.
Because we have to remember a raw truth about human attachment. Negative attention is still 1,000 times better than zero attention.
It is a fundamental law of developmental psychology.
Yeah.
To a neglected, isolated child, being yelled at proves that they exist.
Wow. Being yelled at is proof of life.
Exactly. Being punished means that an adult is finally looking at them. If setting a fire in the trash can, or acting out violently in school, or breaking every rule in the house forces a parent to turn their head and engage, the child will do it.
I really want to push back on the framing of this, though. Society looks at the rebel, the kid acting out, and labels them a bad kid.
We do. We totally do.
We treat it as a behavioral issue, a disciplinary problem. But if we are looking at the roots, how should we actually understand the rebel?
We have to completely reframe the behavior. The rebel isn't a bad kid trying to cause destruction. The rebel is a terrified kid screaming for a tether.
Screaming for a tether? That's powerful.
When a child acts out destructively in a neglectful environment, their behavior is a distress flare. They are signaling, see me, prove to me that I matter enough for you to react. The sympathetic nervous system is highly agitated, they are flooded with stress hormones, and they are using conflict to force a connection.
A fight is an engagement.
Yes. To a starving person, even toxic food will keep you alive for one more day.
Now, let me ask a clarifying question about these two paths. Because human beings are rarely simple.
Right.
Can a person be both? I mean, is it possible that you were the invisible ghost at the dinner table, terrified to make a sound, but then you walked into your middle school and you were the loud, acting out rebel or the hyper-focused performer?
That is an incredibly important nuance, and the answer is absolutely yes.
Okay, how does that work?
Our survival armor is highly adaptable. It is governed by a concept known as state-dependent memory and environmental context. The brain maps specific environments to specific threat profiles.
So it changes depending on the room?
Yes. At the dinner table with an unpredictable, perhaps alcoholic parent, the amygdala calculates that the safest play is dorsal vagal invisibility. Shrink, freeze, survive.
Right.
But the next morning at school, the threat of physical harm might be zero, but the fear of social abandonment is at a critical high. In that new environment, the brain flips the switch to sympathetic activation. That same invisible child suddenly becomes the relentless class clown.
It is like an internal house alarm system. Think about how a complex security system is wired.
Oh, I like this.
Some kids learn to survive by going down into the basement of their own soul and systematically disabling every single alarm, every motion sensor, every glass break detector. They cut the wires to their own emotional needs, their own hunger, their own pain, so that they never, ever trigger a response from the house.
Yes.
They don't want to bother anyone because bothering someone is dangerous, but other kids. They wire their internal alarm system so that the siren is going off constantly at maximum volume. They smash the glass themselves, they kick the doors in because they are desperately trying to force an emergency response from a world that is completely ignoring them.
I love that framing. And the crucial takeaway is that the core driver for both the disabled alarm and the blaring siren is exactly the same.
Which is what?
It's the question: how do I manipulate this specific environment to ensure I'm not destroyed or abandoned? The armor shifts its shape to fit the specific battlefield the child finds themselves on.
Which brings us to a really difficult phase of the recovery journey. When we sit at this table and realize what we've done, when we see the disabled alarms or the smashed glass, the immediate reaction is usually profound shame.
Almost always.
We look at our adult behaviors, the extreme isolating, the desperate people-pleasing, the explosive anger, and we hate ourselves for it. We feel broken. But part of digging up the roots is changing how we view the armor itself.
We have to start by explicitly validating the inner child who built the armor.
Validating them.
This is non-negotiable for true healing. We should not hate these coping mechanisms. We have to look at them objectively. If you were a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old living in a terrifying, unpredictable, or painfully lonely home, your strategy was incredibly smart.
Right, is genius.
It was brilliant. If you became invisible to avoid an abusive parent, that skill literally kept you safe. It minimized your physical harm. It worked.
It worked. That is such a heavy realization. I think we rush to demonize our coping skills without acknowledging their original utility.
We really do.
If you became the performer to keep your depressed mother from completely giving up on life, that skill held your family together.
Exactly. From a neurobiological standpoint, shame is an inhibitor. When we shame ourselves for our coping mechanisms, our brain registers that shame as a new threat.
And what does the brain do when it detects a threat?
It retreats right back into the survival armor.
Wow.
You cannot shame yourself into recovery. You have to look back at that little kid, acknowledge the impossible situation they were in, and say, you did a good job. You kept us alive emotionally. You did exactly what you had to do.
But here is the tragic shift. Here is where the grace for the past violently collides with the harsh reality of the present.
Right.
The exact same behaviors that saved your life in a dysfunctional home will inherently sabotage your life in a functional adult environment. The skills that protected the child are now actively destroying the adult.
That is the defining tragedy of unresolved developmental trauma. The external environment changes, but the internal nervous system does not. The brain is still operating on the map it drew when you were 8 years old. If you learned that being invisible was the absolute only way to survive, what does that look like when you are 35 years old and married to someone who genuinely loves you, who actually wants to know you?
It looks like stonewalling. It looks like secret keeping. It looks like extreme emotional isolation.
Yes.
Your spouse might be looking right at you, begging you to open up, asking what you need, but your nervous system isn't seeing a loving spouse. Your nervous system is seeing a predator.
Exactly.
Your brain is screaming, no, do not speak. If I take up space, if I express a need, I will be attacked.
And the spouse is left completely bewildered because they're offering safety, and you are responding with terror.
Right.
And what if you were the performer? Today, as an adult, you are likely exhausted beyond human measure. You are living with this deep, hidden, terrifying conviction that your spouse, your friends, or your coworkers will abandon you the exact second you stop being useful.
You literally do not know how to rest.
No, you cannot just be.
Yeah.
You believe you have to constantly earn your right to occupy space in the room.
It makes me think of wearing a massive, heavy, incredibly thick insulated winter coat.
Okay, yeah.
If you are a young kid trapped outside in a raging sub-zero blizzard, that coat is your best friend. It saves your life, it keeps your core temperature up, it prevents you from freezing to death.
Right.
But then you grow up, you survive the storm, you walk out of the blizzard and step inside a warm, safe living room with a fire going, surrounded by people who care about you. But you refuse to take the coat off.
Oh, man.
You sit there on the couch, sweating, suffocating, suffering from severe heat stroke because your brain is unequivocally telling you, I need this coat to live.
Yeah.
The environment totally changed, but the wardrobe didn't.
And you are sitting there in that warm, comfortable living room, interacting with the people who care about you, but you are acting as if a blizzard is raging right in front of them.
Yes.
You are bracing against a wind they cannot feel. It is confusing and hurtful for them, and it is absolute torture for you.
I have to ask you this, on behalf of everyone sitting at the cafe table right now looking at their own heavy coats.
Sure.
How terrifying is it to actually take off the coat when your amygdala is absolutely convinced it's still snowing outside? Because it is one thing for me to intellectually, logically know that I am safe. My prefrontal cortex knows I have a good job, a safe home, a loving spouse. But how do we bridge the gap?
That's the hardest part.
Because it is another thing entirely to convince my nervous system that the blizzard is actually over.
Bridging that gap is the hardest work of recovery, and it leads us directly into the massive mental health link. When we talk about how hard it is to take off the coat, we're talking about a clinical state known as hypervigilance.
Right, hypervigilance.
We have to clearly define what this is because it is wildly misunderstood. This isn't just a quirky personality trait where you are a bit of a worrier.
Like, oh, I'm just a stress case.
Exactly. It's not that. This is a profound physiological and psychological state. Hypervigilance is the nervous system stuck permanently in threat detection mode.
Let's really drill down into the mechanics of that. I want to know what hypervigilance actually feels like in the body on a random Tuesday morning or a quiet Saturday afternoon. What is happening internally?
Physiologically, it feels like an inability to ever fully exhale.
Wow.
Imagine sitting on your couch on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. You have absolutely nothing on your schedule, no chores, no deadlines. For a regulated nervous system, this is a moment of deep peace and restoration.
Right, you just relax.
But for a hypervigilant nervous system, the lack of activity triggers a rising sense of panic. You feel a humming electrical current under your skin. Because your baseline is chaos, peace feels dangerous.
Wait, explain that. Why does peace feel dangerous to a traumatized brain?
Because in a chaotic childhood, the quiet moments were usually the terrifying buildup before the explosion.
The calm before the storm.
Exactly.
Yes.
Silence meant the predator was stalking. So, your brain is a radar dish that never, ever powers down. You are constantly scanning the horizon, scanning the room, analyzing the exact tone of your spouse's voice, scrutinizing the micro-expressions on your boss's face, searching for the first faint sign of a threat.
You're just always on.
You are essentially living in a state of continuous, low-grade adrenaline and cortisol release.
And when you are scanning for threats constantly, you inevitably start deploying defensive strategies in your daily life. One of the most common and most praised is perfectionism.
Oh, yes.
We often treat perfectionism as a virtue. We think of it as just having high standards, being detail-oriented, or wanting things to look nice. But when perfectionism is rooted in this kind of trauma response, it isn't about being excellent, it is a shield.
Absolutely.
It is the deeply held, terrifying equation that perfection equals safety.
The neurobiology of trauma-driven perfectionism is fascinating and brutal. If you deeply believe, based on your childhood, that making a mistake, dropping a ball, or showing a human flaw will lead to abandonment, violent rejection, or wrath, then flawless execution is your only defense mechanism.
Because anything less is dangerous.
Right. You are constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. So what do? You double-check and triple-check your emails. You over-prepare for every meeting. You over-analyze every social interaction.
You rehearse conversations in your head for hours before they happen.
Constantly.
You try to anticipate every possible angle of attack, every possible criticism, so you aren't caught off guard. I know people who map out flowcharts in their minds before talking to their spouse about a simple schedule change.
Exactly. Because if you can anticipate the attack and perfectly execute the interaction, you maintain the illusion of control. But the physical toll of maintaining that illusion is staggering.
It has to be.
This explains the profound, bone-deep exhaustion that is so incredibly common in the early stages of recovery. People come to the table and say, I am just so tired all the time.
And it is not normal tired. You aren't just tired because you had a long week at the office or because the kids were loud or because you didn't sleep well for one night.
No.
You are exhausted because your brain has been running a massive, high-powered threat assessment program every waking second of your life since you were 7 years old.
Your body is burning biological fuel at an astronomical rate. Think about what happens to an animal in the wild when it is stalked by a predator.
Right.
The sympathetic nervous system engages. Its heart rate spikes, its muscles flood with blood, its pupils dilate, digestion halts, the immune system is suppressed. It is ready to run or fight for its life.
Yeah.
Now imagine maintaining that precise physiological state for 20, 30, or 40 years.
It is entirely unsustainable.
Completely. The adrenal fatigue, the chronic sleep disturbances, the unexplained chronic pain, the severe digestive issues, autoimmune flare-ups. These are the body's natural, unavoidable response to holding that level of physiological tension for a lifetime. Your body is physically breaking down under the weight of the armor.
It is exactly like a muscle that has been tightly clenched for 20 years.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
Imagine making a fist, clenching your bicep as hard as you can, bracing for a physical impact that you know's coming, and you hold it and hold it. Eventually, the muscle cramps. The lactic acid builds up to excruciating levels.
It hurts just thinking about it.
And after 20 years, even if someone comes along and says, hey, the danger is gone, you can let go, you realize you have genuinely forgotten the physiological mechanism of how to unclench it. The clenched fist has literally become your natural resting state.
That is a perfect description of chronic somatic tension. You try to relax your body, and it actually feels more uncomfortable, more disorienting, and more dangerous than staying tense.
Because it's foreign.
Yes. Relaxation feels like vulnerability, and to the traumatized brain, vulnerability feels like death.
And here is where I really want to challenge the world we live in right now, because society, particularly the modern hustle culture, totally exploits and rewards this trauma response.
Oh, 100%.
It praises the performer and the trauma-driven perfectionist. We give them promotions. We call them the employee of the month. We praise them in our communities for being the person who never, ever says no to volunteering.
Right, the servant heart.
Exactly. How do we start to recognize that our so-called great work ethic or our servant heart might actually be an undiagnosed mental health crisis driven by childhood terror?
It is the ultimate disguise. We hide our deepest trauma behind socially acceptable, highly rewarded behaviors. If your coping mechanism was chemical dependency, society quickly tells you there's a problem.
Right. The consequences are obvious.
But if your coping mechanism is working 80 hours a week, organizing every community event, and flawlessly maintaining an immaculate image society gives you an award, they put you on a pedestal.
But internally, the devastation is exactly the same. The engine driving the workaholic and the engine driving the addict is often the identical machine, profound, unmet pain, and the absolute terror of being unacceptable.
Yes. And that disguise, that flawless mask we wear to survive and to earn our keep in the adult world, inevitably leads to a devastating consequence. It creates an environment of profound emotional isolation.
We often refer to it as living behind the glass wall.
Let's explore the glass wall, because this is where the relational price of our childhood armor becomes unbearable.
Yeah, it really does.
You can be the life of the party. You can be the most reliable, steadfast person in your community. You can be married, have children, and be surrounded by a loving family. Yet, internally, you feel utterly, completely, desperately alone.
You are separated from the warmth of human connection by an invisible, impenetrable barrier.
The barrier exists because the people around you don't actually know you.
They know the mask.
Exactly. They only know the mask you curated for them. They know the performer who always makes them laugh and never brings down the mood. They know the compliant, invisible person who never complains, never has a conflicting preference, and always goes with the flow.
Or the perfectionist who just handles every crisis without breaking a sweat.
Right. But they do not know the real, messy, fearful, needy human being underneath the armor. And because they don't know the real you, their love and their praise feel completely hollow.
It creates a massive debilitating case of imposter syndrome of the heart. People look at you and say, we love you so much. You are so wonderful. We are so lucky to have you.
And you don't believe them.
Your internal immediate response is, no, you don't. You love the character I am playing. You love what I do for you. You love the utility I provide. And that breeds a secret, agonizing terror. If I drop the act, if I let the mask slip for even a moment, if I show them my actual needs, my actual exhaustion, or my actual flaws, they will leave.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of isolation. You believe you must wear the mask to be loved, but the mask prevents you from ever feeling loved.
It is like being a highly skilled ventriloquist.
Okay, explain that.
Think about a ventriloquist on a stage. The spotlight is bright, the theater is packed with people, and the ventriloquist has this dummy sitting on their knee. The dummy is hilarious, the dummy is charming, the dummy is telling all the right jokes, singing all the right songs, and everyone in the audience is cheering for the dummy.
Right.
They are laughing at the dummy. They genuinely love the dummy. But nobody is looking at the actual person operating it in the shadows. The person pulling the strings, sweating under the hot lights, exhausted from making it all happen, they are completely unseen. It is a desperately lonely way to live your entire life.
And the tragic irony, the heartbreaking reality of that analogy is that you created the dummy to get love in the first place. You built the mask, you forged the armor to secure connection when you were a child.
Yeah.
But the very tool you built to get love is the exact thing preventing you from actually receiving it today. Love cannot penetrate the mask. It bounces harmlessly off the heavy metal armor.
It raises such a poignant, difficult question. I want to put this right on the table for you listening
Yeah.
right now. I want you to really weigh this in your mind. Which hurts worse? Being rejected for who you truly are, or being entirely accepted for someone you are pretending to be?
That question is the turning point in recovery. That is the moment the tectonic plates shift.
It changes everything.
It does. For a long time, sometimes decades, we firmly believe that being rejected for who we truly are is the worst possible fate a human being can endure. We avoid it at all costs. We will build any mask, play any role to prevent that exposure.
But eventually,
Eventually, the sheer physiological and emotional exhaustion of the performance catches up with you. The profound loneliness of being loved for a lie becomes heavier and more painful than the fear of rejection. You realize that starvation in the shadows is worse than risking the light.
but taking that risk, stepping into the light without the armor, forces us to confront the relational price we've been paying. Because when you are living in this hypervigilant state, wearing this heavy metal, it wreaks absolute destructive havoc on adult intimacy,
Especially in a marriage.
especially in a marriage or in your closest, most vulnerable friendships. Let's talk about what happens when armor clashes in a relationship.
When you put two people together in a marriage, and both of them are wearing their childhood armor, both operating from a place of unhealed survival mechanisms, conflict becomes incredibly dangerous. It either becomes explosive or completely paralyzing.
Right.
Let's look at the neurological reality of what happens during a marital argument. When a conflict starts with a spouse, the adult brain, the rational, logical 35 or 40-year-old prefrontal cortex often just shuts down completely. And the terrified 10-year-old takes over the controls.
The scared 10-year-old takes the lead. That is so recognizable, and it is terrifying how fast it happens.
It's instant.
Your spouse says something incredibly simple, like, hey, why didn't you pay this bill on time? Or, you didn't listen to me today when I was talking. And suddenly, you are not reacting to the reality of what your spouse just said.
No, not at all.
You aren't reacting to a minor, everyday miscommunication. You are reacting to the massive, echoing ghost of what your chaotic childhood environment felt like.
The brain essentially time travels. This is the amygdala hijack we talked about earlier. If your spouse raises their voice slightly out of minor frustration, your hyper-vigilant nervous system doesn't rationally assess the situation and say, my partner had a long day and is frustrated about the dishes.
Right, you don't have that perspective.
Your nervous system bypasses logic entirely. It says a loud voice means danger. A loud voice means we are about to be abandoned, punished, or physically harmed.
So the 10-year-old survival skills kick in instantly.
Instantly, within milliseconds. You either go totally invisible, the dorsal vagal freeze response, you shut down, you stonewall, you literally lose access to the language centers of your brain and cannot speak.
Or you go the other way.
Or you become the rebel, the sympathetic fight response. You lash out with disproportionate, searing rage to defend yourself from a perceived mortal threat. Your spouse is left standing there bewildered because your reaction is a level 10 nuclear response to a level 2 domestic problem.
But they don't see the reality. You aren't fighting them. You are fighting ghosts from your past.
And in that hijacked state, true intimacy is fundamentally impossible. You cannot hold hands, either physically or emotionally, while you are wearing heavy metal.
You just can't.
Intimacy, true, deep human connection, requires vulnerability. It requires soft edges. It requires the ability to be seen, to be known, and yes, to potentially be wounded. And vulnerability is the exact specific thing our childhood survival skills were perfectly engineered to prevent.
Our armor was built for one purpose, to keep things out. It is indiscriminate. It doesn't know the difference between a weapon swung by an abuser and a gentle touch offered by a loving spouse. It blocks both equally. So your spouse reaches out to comfort you or to connect with you, and all they hit is cold, hard, unyielding steel.
Which is heartbreaking for everyone involved.
It makes me think of two people trying to shake hands, trying to embrace, while wearing heavy, thick iron gauntlets.
Yeah.
They are going through the motions of connection, they are reaching out, but neither of them can actually feel the warmth of the other person's skin. The metal is grinding against metal, there are sparks, there is noise, there is immense friction, but there is zero actual contact. You are married, you sleep in the same bed, you share a bank account, but emotionally, you are miles apart, trapped inside these metal suits.
And that friction, that constant clashing of iron gauntlets is exhausting. It drains the life out of a marriage. It leads to the deep resentment, the loneliness, and the despair that brings so many people to our tables here at the cafe.
Yeah, we see it all the time.
They're utterly exhausted from fighting, and they're starved for the warmth of connection, but they don't know how to take the gauntlets off without feeling like they will be immediately destroyed.
So let's look at the mechanics of change. How do we actually do it? How do we hit the pause button in the middle of a heated argument when we feel that heavy metal visors slamming down over our eyes?
It takes practice.
How do we stop the neurological time travel? How do we find the capacity to tell our spouse, hold on, my 10-year-old self is trying to run the conversation right now?
It begins with profound physical awareness, which is exactly the foundation we are laying at this table today. You have to be able to name what is happening in your physical body before you can change your behavior.
Name the physical feeling.
Yes. When the visor slams down, your heart races, your chest tightens, your breathing changes. In that specific moment, hitting pause requires immense courage. It requires engaging the prefrontal cortex just enough to say out loud, I am feeling incredibly defensive right now. My body is reacting to something much bigger than what we are actually talking about. I need a minute to regulate.
That's huge.
It is the courage to expose the mechanism, to say simply, I am scared.
And finding the courage to expose the mechanism to say, I am scared, brings us to the ultimate necessary shift in this journey, moving from psychological awareness to spiritual restoration.
This is where true healing happens.
Because acknowledging the armor, understanding the neuroscience of the amygdala and the vagus nerve is a massive step one. But we cannot take the heavy metal off through sheer willpower. The terror is too deep. We need an external source of safety that is stronger than our internal fear. We need the safety of Jesus Christ.
This is the beautiful, redeeming truth that anchors everything we do here. When we look at the Word of God, we see a totally different, eternal perspective on our pain and our survival.
Right.
I think specifically of the deep, profound truths found in Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up, you discern my thoughts from afar. Think about what that means for the traumatized child. God was there in those early, frightening rooms of your childhood.
That reality changes everything. God was there. When you were holding your breath in the hallway, trying so desperately to be invisible, thinking no one in the world cared if you existed, God saw you.
He saw you.
When you were exhaustingly performing, trying to keep your family from falling apart, carrying a weight no child should carry, God saw you. He saw the little child trying so hard to survive. He knows exactly, intimately, why the armor was put on. There is no condemnation from him for the coping skills you used to stay alive.
Not at all. And because he understands exactly why you put the armor on, God does not angrily demand that we drop our defenses.
No, he doesn't yell at us.
He doesn't yell at us to stop being hyper-vigilant.
Yeah.
He knows that yelling only triggers the armor to lock tighter. Instead, he provides something the nervous system has never experienced: agape love, an unconditional, unchanging love so secure, a grace so complete, and a foundation so unshakable that we finally, maybe for the very first time in our entire lives, feel safe enough to voluntarily unbuckle the heavy metal.
He provides the absolute safety the environment never could. He wants to replace that exhausting, cortisol-drenched hypervigilance with his perfect peace. But there is a crucial step we have to take in this spiritual restoration.
We have a part to play.
Right. It requires our participation. Before Jesus Christ can give us our true face, we have to be willing to identify and name the old mask. We have to bring the darkness into the light.
Yes. Naming the coping skill strips it of its secret neurological power over us. We have to be able to stand in the light and say, Lord, I am using my relentless performance to try to buy love. I am using my silence and my withdrawal to try to control my environment and stay safe.
Confessing the mechanism.
When you confess that, when you speak it aloud, you move it from the primitive, reactive part of your brain into the conscious, rational light. It stops being a secret, automatic reflex and becomes a choice. You hand the heavy metal over to him.
It is a slow process of thawing. You know, it makes me think of a frozen, locked-up river in the dead of a bitter winter.
Oh, that's a good picture.
The ice is thick, hard, dangerous, and completely unmoving. But when the spring comes, you don't have to attack the ice with hammers and pickaxes. You don't have to beat the river into submission to make it flow again. That would be exhausting and ineffective.
Right.
You just have to stay in the light. You stay under the consistent warmth of the spring sun, and the rigidity naturally, slowly, inevitably melts away. The spiritual restoration we find in Christ as the sun, as we stay in his presence, as we steep our nervous systems in the truth that we are fully known and fully loved without ever having to perform or hide, the rigid armor of our childhood naturally begins to melt.
It melts, and the living water of our true God-given selves begins to flow again. We can finally breathe. We can finally unclench the muscle that we've been holding tight for 20 years. We can finally step out from the shadows behind the ventriloquist dummy and let the light hit our actual face.
And as we sit here at the cafe, coming to the end of our time together today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. I want you to genuinely deeply think about the massive amount of daily physical and emotional energy it takes to hold up that heavy armor.
It's exhausting.
Think about the biological calories your soul burns every single day, trying to maintain the mask, trying to constantly scan the horizon for threats, always preparing for the other shoe to drop. Imagine gathering up all of that exhausted, wasted energy.
Wow. Yeah.
What could you build? Who could you love? What kind of unimaginable deep peace could you experience if you let God take that massive weight from you and redirected all of that energy into simply living as your true, unmasked self?
It is a beautiful, life-changing question, and it is a reality that is waiting for you, but you don't have to figure it out in isolation. In fact, you can't.
No, you can't do it alone.
Recovery happens in community. The nervous system heals in the presence of other safe nervous systems.
Yeah.
The armor comes off when you're sitting at a table with others who are bravely taking their armor off, too.
That is exactly right, which is why we want to extend a warm, genuine invitation to you right now. Step out of the isolation. Step out of the shadows. Come and join the community at Peters Creek Baptist Church in South Park, Pennsylvania. We have a place saved for you at the table.
We want you to know exactly what to expect when we come. Here's our weekly Friday schedule. 5:15 to 6 p.m., dinner in the social hall final Friday of each month only. 6:30 p.m., large group worship. 7:30 to 8:30 p.m., gender-specific small groups. 8:30 to 9 p.m., Crosstalk Cafe.
Email Craig Amstone at craig.amstone@gmail.com or contact the church office at info@pcbc.church.
Visit pcbc.notchurch or find a group anywhere near you at clerlocatals.com.
You never have to walk this road of recovery alone again. The heavy metal can come off. We are so grateful you sat with us today. Until next time, take care, keep leaning into the light, and remember that you are deeply loved just as you are.